Hello everybody, and welcome to this truly legendary deck tech. Today I'm here to share with you my most mythical deck, helmed by Kolvori, God of Kinship. Now, Kolvori is 2 and 2 green for a 2/4 legendary creature god that has, as long as you control 3 or more legendary creatures, Kolvori gets +4/+2 and has vigilance. Effectively she becomes a 6/6 vigilance. And also she has, for 1 and a green and tapping her, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a legendary creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. So, mono green, that gives you specific card advantage. As soon as she was revealed, I instantly fell in love with her. Both the art and the ability really appealed to me. I've always been drawn to legendary creatures in Magic, and their representation of key characters in the story. Also, it really doesn't hurt that they are usually quite strong cards or have interesting and unique abilities. You can imagine my delight when I learned of Commander and the ability, a requirement really, to build around a legendary creature. This deck is very focused not only on legendary creatures, but legendary things in general. I'll be dividing, as per usual, this deck into chapters, going over its philosophy, themes, cards, and finally, some tips, in case you want to try out this particular build, or just want to have Kolvori helm your own legendary deck. First off, let's go over its philosophy. Unfortunately, Kolvori has very little lore about her. What we know is that she is a member of the Scotti family of gods in Kaldheim, that they were not the original gods of the plane, and that she is the youngest child of Alrund and Cosima. She is very talkative, and has a deep love of nature and her family, though she does see that her family is falling apart, and that their reign over Kaldheim is growing shaky, a perspective she shares with Aegon, god of death, though they don't really see eye to eye. Personally, I believe Kolvori to be an excellent cook, since she tries to mend the rifts forming between her family members by leaving her gifts. Plus, both her arts display her surrounded by wild creatures, which leads me to believe her kinship is not limited to the other Scotti, but extended to all living things, wild creatures in particular. Based on this, the deck's philosophy centers around imagining Kolvori in her forest dwelling, inviting the creatures of the forest to join her in defense of all that is natural and good. Beyond that, I also believe Kolvori's kindness and desire to form her own family encompass all sentient life, even if evil at first. As per usual, this is not a competitive deck, more rather a fun thematic deck. On to the themes. Speaking of themes, these decks' themes are, as expected, legends! And also deeply green cards, defined by cards that, at least in my opinion, produce effects that are deeply connected to the philosophy of green, meaning nature, strength, and the supremacy of the body, let's say, of creatures, essentially. The personal lore that Kolvori cooks came about with the release of the backgrounds in Baldur's Gate, which are all, fortunately, legendary. Since cooking feeds the body, and in Magic usually feeding and growth are represented by +1/+1 counters, the deck also has a slight sub-theme of +1/+1 counters. I also wanted to run cards that specifically deal with forests. Now on to the cards. We're going to start with lands. Sadly, I forgot to organize the land, so I'm just going to do it very quickly. I have 2 proxies in the deck, one of which is a land that we will see shortly, and another one that is from the D&D movie Secret Lair, that it's simply very expensive at the moment, and I'm going to wait and see if Wizards of the Coast is decent and gives us another printing of the card. We'll see in the following months. Starting off with the basics. There are 21 basic forests, if I'm not mistaken. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 21 forests. I chose these particular forests because 1, they are very clearly forests, and 2, since they are from Theros, Beyond Death, if I'm not mistaken, and thus have a connection to green and to gods, I felt they were very thematic and appropriate for a legendary themed deck. On to the non-basic lands. I have Blighted Woodland. It does somewhat violate the theme of good and natural things, but it's a land that replaces itself with 2 basics, and since the deck has 21 basics, it's rather useful. Mosswort Bridge. Given that this is a mono-green deck, it is not hard to have 10 power on the field, and as such, for one, being able to cast a heftier spell is a very, very good ability. Boseiju, Who Endures. It's a legendary land, it taps for green, and it can act as removal, which this deck has very little of. It's excellent. I usually just use it for the mana. Castle Garenbrig. The ability to filter 4 green into 6 that can be used not only to cast creatures or to activate their abilities, excessively useful. Plus, in my mind, this is a legendary land because it represents a unique location. You wouldn't be able to have 2, 3, or 4 Castle Garenbrig simply pop up. It exists. It is singular. Gaia's Cradle, the most famous of all legendary green lands. In this deck, yes, I am not going to have a particularly wide board most of the time, but this is a legendary card. Plus, I have a personal rule where I tend to only use one specific card per deck, so by having it here, I am much less tempted to use it, for example, in the deck I showed in the previous deck, in Gav, where truly this would be an absurd land to run. In the past iteration I used it there. Generating 20-30 mana, too much. Way too much. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. Again, legendary land. And since a lot of the creatures and permanents in the deck have multiple green pips, very easily this card nets me a positive amount of mana. I invest 2, I get 5, 6, 7. It's very, very good. Okina, Temple to Grandfathers. It is a legendary land. That's all that matters. It may not be very good, but it is a legendary land, so it fits with the theme. Auden Reef, the Vastwood. Again, this, in my mind, is a legendary land. Even the name, Auden Reef, the Vastwood, it represents a specific location, a unique location. And though it enters the battlefield tapped, which is a bit slow, the second ability to put +1/+1 counters on every green creature, +1/+1 counter on every green creature that entered the battlefield this turn, does feed into the sub-theme of growth and strengthening of the body. The other fetch land, Myriad Landscape. Another legendary land of immense power, Yavimaya Hollow. The deck doesn't really have a lot of recursion. It does have some cards that are very good at that, but it is not overly focused on that. I'm more focused on having my creatures stay on the field and remain there. So the ability to, for one and itself, regenerating a creature is very, very useful. Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, another legendary land that makes all my colorless generating lands, which are not many, produce green, is good. Plus, although I don't agree with the way the card works, since it's clearly modeled after Urborg, and Urborg is a festering wound that seeps its evil and its swampiness all around, it is somewhat thematic that forests just grow and expand, taking over my opponent's decks. Mana bases. Midden, the Moaning Well. Up until now, I have never used the ability to sacrifice a creature to gain life, but again, it's a legendary land, and if ever someone tries to steal a creature from me, I'd rather kill it myself than let it be stolen. Also, a funny note, so to speak. The Portuguese translation of this card is wrong, because in English, well, as everybody knows, can be translated to either well-wishing, a good thing, or a well, a hole in the ground where you extract water from. And in Portuguese, they translated it to Midden, o bem lamuriente, using not the water extraction meaning of the word, but the good meaning of the word. So it means Mirren the well moaning. So it's it's just silly. And the first proxy, the Shire, which was revealed last month. It's a green, it's a mono green legendary land that enters the battlefield tapped unless I control a legendary creature, which to me even adds more to the theme. Plus, for 1 and a green and tapping it, and tapping an untapped creature I control, I make a food token. Kolvori is a cook. Now she has an essentially a kitchen. This is the only food-producing card in the whole deck. Still, haven't had the luck of having it come into my hand in the games I've played. Now on to the meat, the true meat of the deck. We're going to look at the creatures. We start off with Green Sleeves, Motto Sorcerer. It makes badgers, which I find very cute animals. It is, an XX, where X is the number of lands I control, which is excellent, given that although the deck only runs 34 lands, if I'm not mistaken, there is also an Ayara, so this creature can become potentially very, very large. And it's here more for... It really feels like a very green creature. It's an elemental, it creates more living things, and its protection from both planeswalkers and wizards, I feel it speaks very well to the green's aversion to blue's mental magics. It's deception. Oops. Huatuo, Honored Physician. Oh, by the way, every single creature in the deck is a legendary creature, so I'm going to stop mentioning that part. It is one of the recursion spells of the deck. Plus, given green's tendency to be aggressive and to fight, it makes sense to me that Kolvori would have a doctor friend. Someone who'd help her, patch up the wounds from the skirmishes that will occur. Runadi, Behemoth Collar. It's a mana dork. It grants me +1/+1 counters, and though this is a bit convoluted, creatures I control with 3 or more +1/+1 counters have haste. There are ways for my creatures to enter the battlefield with the counters, even those with less than mana value 5. But usually this is not doesn't really grant haste. It's more a mana dork with upsides. One of my favorite god cards in all of Magic. Ronash, the Indomitable. A 5/5 Death Touch indestructible that can only attack or block if I have another creature with power 4 or greater, which again, in the context of the deck, is usually not hard. Plus he can grant for 2 and a green, +2/+0 and trample to another creature. A buffer, a pumper, and an excellent blocker. Kogla, the Titan Ape. One of the few removal spells in the deck. Plus, he's King Kong. Look at this. He's King Kong. He even has, if you can find the art, a tiny human in its hand. Plus, he can save some humans. The deck doesn't really have many. Huatuo and, if I'm not mistaken, Reki. But, it's a 7/6 that fights and wrecks artifacts and enchantments. Brilliant. One of the evil characters of the deck, so let me see if I can show them both in quick succession. I'm going to start with the new Vorinclex, which can flip to the Grand Evolution, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, the Grand Evolution. I know Vorinclex is an evil character. He's a Phyrexian. He's anti-natural. But he has 3 printings. The Voice of Hunger, the Monstrous Raider, and this one. The 2 previous ones are excessively powerful. Doubling my mana and forcing my opponents to only untap their lands for mana. You can only untap a land that you tap for mana every other turn. That is oppressive. It's uncomfortable to me. But 5 for a 6 is trample reach. That gives me 2 forest cards, and then I'm not really going to use the backside many times, but the milling, it's not the best. The second and third parts of the saga are the ones I really want to get to. Netting +1/+1 counters to my creatures, I find this excellent. And the fight ability, I instantly thought of Ronash. If I have enough mana and I have this reach its 3rd chapter, I can just sink all my mana, have Ronash fight every single creature my opponents have, essentially wiping their boards of creatures, and then swing in for the win. But mostly, this is a 6/6 trample reach that grants me 2 forests. The other evil character in the deck is Zopandrel, Hunger Dominus, a 4/6 reach that doubles my creature's power and toughness at the beginning of each combat. I had unnatural growth in the deck, but it didn't feel right. Unnatural growth. Though Zopandrel, again, is an evil Phyrexian character, I like to think that Kolvori's excellent cooking and deep compassion and kinship can convert anyone to the great task of protecting nature rather than trying to destroy it. Baru, Feast of Kroza, has a landfall ability specific to forests that gives +1/+1 and trample to my green creatures. So this is a double whammy. A triple whammy, actually. First, a legendary green creature. Second, it deals with forests. Third, it only grants his bonus to green creatures in a deck that only has green creatures. It's perfect. Plus, if I get really lucky, I can get 2 of the buffs. Or if a Yara is on the field, any ETB by a non-token creature gives me the trigger. Kamal, Heart of Kroza, a repeatable, an automatic repeatable overrun. How good is that? How bleeping good is that? Plus the other Kamal that can awaken lands, I feel is a bit of a mean card. Oh, you're going to Damnation. I'm just going to have you blow up all of your own lands. It's a bit evil. Plus, he can awaken lands into creatures that are indestructible. So, if I'm really in a pinch, I can just wake a forest up and have it block someone. Thrun, the Last Troll, the epitome of the resilient green creature. He regenerates, can't be countered, and has hexproof if I'm not mistaken. Brilliant. Just brilliant. Omnath, Locus of Mana. Another card that I feel is completely on point in the deck. The deck is mono green. He's a mono green. He grows. He stores mana, working in a way like a ramp spell. I just love Omnath. Now we have a small trio of Renata, Call to the Hunt, Nylea, God of the Hunt, and Nylea, Keen-Eyed. All of them do excellent things for the deck, right? Reducing my creature's mana cost, giving them trample and being able to pump them, and giving them +1/+1 counters on entry. All of them are brilliant. Plus, I've always loved Nylea. In her lore, particularly, her quiver has only 4 arrows, but each arrow, when shot from her bow, causes the seasons to progress from winter to spring to summer to winter. And by looking at Bow of Nylea, you can see those 4 seasons. Obviously, I have Bow of Nylea in the deck. From the +1/+1 counter, which is the season of growth. The 2 damage to a creature with flying, I see as summer. Gaining 3 life would be autumn. And putting 4 target cards from my graveyard on the bottom would be winter. So the seasons keep cycling. Plus, they are gods. And obviously Kolvori would have a lot of god business to talk to other gods. Another pair in Gorklaw, Terror of Kalsisma, a cost reducer, and 2 only creatures that have power 4 or greater. Again, a very green ability. Plus another form of overrun I find to be very, very good. And Surak and Goreclaw. In a previous iteration, the deck did run the mono-green Surak as a way to grant haste to my creatures. Eventually I moved on to Concordant Crossroads, but now I have this guy. All upsides. It's a creature. It has trample. It gives trample to my other creatures. If everything goes right in this deck, at some points a creature may have 4 or 5 instances of trample, all at the same time. I know it's useless, but I find it funny that my creature not only tramples, but it tramples the trample of the trample of the trample. And it gives my creatures haste and +1/+1 counters upon entry. I mean, excellent. Another card that I feel encompasses Green's philosophy, and this deck's particular philosophy, to a point. Like, amazing. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. Perhaps one of the single most powerful cards in the whole deck. Turning all my non-token creatures into mana dorks is bonkers. And as you'll see once we reach the sorceries, where we have our big finishers. Plus, again, she's the world soul of Zendikar. The manifestation of Zendikar's wildness. I mean, great. One of the few flying creatures in the deck, Kura, the Boundless Sky. In the past I also ran Yugon, the mono-green Kamigawan deck, but sadly the card isn't very good. I also went with Old Gnawbone, but making treasures in mono-green is not something that makes a lot of sense to me. And Old Gnawbone really went off the rails very easily. I mean, unblocked, okay, I have 7 more mana, let's just dump that mana and empty my hand. Too much. Kura, a 4/4 flying Death Touch, excellent blocker, can ramp. I will most likely never use the spirit generating ability. So, if they die, I get mana. And I'll also kill your creature, unless it has indestructible. Perhaps the most legendary of all cards in this deck, the Tarask. Sadly, as every person has told me, everyone that knows about D&D has told me, this representation of the Tarask is very lackluster, since the Tarask is supposed to be, or to have been, the most difficult creature to defeat. But 9 for 10/10, that if cast, has haste. Oh, haste? Yes. Haste and ward 10, and that fights creatures on attack. It's fundamentally a removal spell in this deck. A truly stupid card in this deck, Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. Can give me draws. Most likely I will have the biggest creature on the board. I mean, with the Tarask, with the Shaya, and Zapandrel, Vorinclex, it's very easy to have the biggest creature on the board, and then granting me a load of mana. A big load of mana. I like Selvala very much. Gilandra. Good question. Since this card is in French, I sadly don't remember her name in English. But 3 for a 1/2 that gives me green mana, 1 green when tapped, and when that mana is used to cast a spell with a mana value 6 or greater, draw. So, generates mana and can give me draw in a way that I feel is very green. Excellent. And now for perhaps the best card in the deck, given the theme. Reki, the History of Kamigawa. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, draw a card. These are all legendary things. There are many legends here, also here, and at least 1 legendary sorcery. If this guy stays on the field, he will usually net me 4, 5, 6 cards throughout the game. He is amazing. The other proxy in the deck, Doric, Nature's Avenger. First, I really enjoyed the fact that they are a Tiefling Druid, a 3/3 with Vigilance, that upon entering the battlefield gives me a forest card onto the battlefield tapped, and upon attacking will transform into Doric, Owlbear Avenger. Owlbears are just amazing. I mean, the idea of fusing a creature, the owl, a creature associated with wisdom, with the ferocity of a bear. So you're going to make a bear, which is already dangerous, into a wise, clever bear. Terrifying. Which is a 6/6 trample, and when it transforms into Doric, Owlbear Avenger, other legendary creatures you control get +2/+2 and trample until the end of turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, transform Doric. So, as long as I have one in a green, when I attack, I have an overrun. Brilliant! Okay, it's a legendary specific overrun, but again, all of these are legends. All of these are legends. So in this deck it functions as an overrun. Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia. A mana dork that can untap itself and grow if I cast creature spells with power 5 or greater. Granted, the deck doesn't have many power 5 or greater creatures, but still, they tap for 2 mana that can only be used to activate abilities of creatures or cast creatures. Again, a very good card. This card required me to make a choice. Dozin, the Falling Leaf. I haven't told, yes, that I should run Yeva, Nature's Herald, that giving flash to my green creatures is a good thing. Yes. But I feel green, in its spirit, is a very sorcery speed color, so to speak. I wanted to make this deck, in a way, honest. I wanted it to play during my turn. There are very little surprises. You see everything coming. You see me having a lot of mana, you know a big X spell might come, or a big creature, or something of the sort. So I opted for Dozin as a way to stop players from countering my spells and, in quotation marks, keep the table honest. Titania, Nature's Force. This card gained a lot of value once I added the Vorinclex, since I may play forest cards from my graveyard. Whenever a forest enters the battlefield under my control, I make a 5/3 green elemental, and when an elemental I control dies, I may mill 3 cards. I mostly used it because she's Titania. She is a long-lived creature, that elemental, that really manifests the aspect of green of growth beyond any measure. And sadly, another creature I haven't had the chance to see in action when I play. Another piece of removal in Pulchranus, World Eater. 4/4/5/5 is also always good. That then, in a way, fights a number of creatures and they fight him back. So usually I'll fight 3 or 4 creatures and come out ahead because he survives. I forgot to put this guy next to his brother, but Thrun, Breaker of Silence. Again, another card I sadly haven't had the opportunity to try, but all he says is target me only with green things. Which I believe is a very green thing. Only nature touches, so to speak, nature. Plus 5/5 for a 5/5 uncounterable, trample, indestructible during my turn. I feel it's a good trade. Multani, Yavimaya's Avatar. I like Multani. Yes, her art doesn't really manifest a creature that grows so large. It would make more sense to me if Multani would be towering far up into the sky while the forest is at their feet. But a big creature that has reach and trample and then can recur itself? Excellent. Arasta of the Endless Web. I do believe Everybody likes a bit of gossip, even a god. So Ontiarasta is the premier source of gossip for this gang. Plus giving me reach creatures whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery is very good from a defensive standpoint, since the deck has one flyer, two, perhaps four creatures with reach. So again, I believe, and I don't feel bad about having a deck that doesn't really protect the sky, since green is usually close to the ground with worms, elves, spiders, and all that. But from a mechanical and a gameplay standpoint, having some reach is very valuable. Toski, Bearer of Secrets, the first legendary creature to enter the deck. Though I do feel Toski's ability was a bit miswritten, since in a go-wide strategy, he goes completely bonkers, netting you a ton of draws. Plus, its name is a bit obvious as a reference to Ratatoskr. They could have gone a bit, more creative, but I like the little bearded squirrel all the same. Sarith, the Viper's Fang, protection, death touch, and the ability to untap either one of my many, a lot of mana producing lands, as Cradle, Nykthos, and Itlimok, Cradle of the Sun, or untapping my commander to reactivate its ability. Win-win-win! Plus Death Touch and Trample is a truly absurd combination, because the wording for Trample says excess damage dealt to the blocker is dealt to the controller, and Death Touch says any amount of damage kills. So technically, I have a 5/5 Trample, and it's blocked by a 7/7. My 5/5 needs only to deal 1 damage to kill the blocker, and the remaining hits the face. And one of my finishers, God Eternal Ronash. The ability to double my creature's power on ETB and granting them, I believe, vigilance, since, this card is in a bit of a weird language. Let me just check. Ronash. Yes. It doubles the power of each other creature I control, and those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. Perfect finisher, because even if I don't kill all my opponents, all my creatures stay untapped to block the inevitable counterattack from the remaining players. Now let's move on to the artifacts. Being that this is a green deck, I made an effort to try and run mostly natural artifacts. Rocks, twigs, etc. However, the legendary theme is more important, so some of the artifacts aren't natural, but there's only one of them that is not legendary, which makes me very, very sad, and it should be. And it's Conduit of Worlds. This is one of my recursion pieces, but it's mostly here because this thing, which in lore will eventually become the Realm Breaker, the tree the Phyrexians use to invade all the planes in the multiverse in the dumbest, least strategic way possible, is from a sapling of the World Tree, which is not native of Kaldheim, Kolvori's plane. So in my mind it makes sense that Kolvori wants a bit of the World Tree near her. Plus I feel this is a very, very fair recursion card, giving me the ability to play lands from my graveyard, and I can tap, choose a non-land permanent in my graveyard. If I haven't cast a spell this turn, I may cast that card. If I do, I can't cast an additional spell this turn, activate only as a sorcery. I feel this card is very, very fair in the way it works. The Bovnalia, which we've already talked about. A Mana Rock in Scepter of Eternal Glory. Yes, this is a Necron a card that comes from the Necron pre-con deck of Warhammer 40k, but it's a legendary Gilded Lotus That only works if I have 3 or more forests. I think it's fair. Plus, the art has a lot of green. Heroes Podium. The coat of arms, so to speak, for legendary creatures. Making my board even stronger and being able to fetch a legendary creature from the top. The Shadow Spear. Sometimes my opponents have pesky, hexproof and indestructible creatures. Plus, it's one of the very few ways the deck has to gain life, which at times can be very important to ensure my survival and my ability to continue to summon massive creatures and wail on my opponents with them. 2 cards in succession because they do the same. Bitter Thorn, Nissa's Animus. I know, Phyrexianize, whatever. I don't care. I didn't even get the Germ token. To me, this is just a second Sword of the Animist. Giving +1/+1 to equipped creature, and then whenever it attacks, I go into my deck, fetch a basic land, and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Yes, the Sword of the Animist costs 2 to play and 2 to equip, and the Bitter Thorn 3 to play and 3 to equip. But since Nissa is the green planeswalker, and let's just forget all that Phyrexianization, cured from Phyrexianization, that doesn't matter to me. It's here. It's a very recent edition, still haven't had the chance to test it. The Great Henge. Is there any other thing I need to say? +1/+1 counters, mana, life, and its cost reduced by the greatest power among creatures I control. It is not rare that I play this for 3 or just 2 mana. Oh, and it gives me draw. I always forget this thing does way too much. It's one of the cards I really don't feel bad if I play it and someone just goes, Crows and Grip. I really don't. This thing is too strong. Too strong. Rona's Monument. We have 2 Ronas. Let's have the Monument. Reduces the casting cost of my green creatures, and whenever I cast a creature, I give +2/+2 trample to another creature. Perfect! A single target mini overrun. Mox Amber. Is there any other Mox that would make sense here? It is a legend, and it only adds mana of the color of my legendary creatures or planeswalkers. No planeswalkers in the deck, so it's a Mox Emerald, in essence, in this deck. Plus, since it had a 0 casting cost, if Reiki is on the field, I cast it and I give a draw. I get a draw, so 0, draw a card, and get a mana rock. Perfect! The 2 iterations of the Ozolith, +1/+1 counters, +1/+1 counters, plus they are both, so to speak, naturally occurring artifacts. And last but not least, Nyx Lotus. Mono green. A load of green pips. I mean, most of my creatures have 2 pips. Some even have 3 pips. So, again, it's not hard for this card to generate 5, 6, 7 green mana. Just brilliant. Plus, it's a flower. It is a bleeping flower. Moving on to the enchantments. In the enchantment department, sadly, there are a bit more non-legendary enchantments, which does make me a bit sad. I mean, let's be honest, there are only 2 legendary enchantments. The one you've already seen, Itlimok, Growing Right of Itlimok, which will then flip to Itlimok Cradle of the Sun. It's an updated Gaia's Cradle that I need to have 4 or more creatures for it to transform, but when it enters the battlefield, I look at the top 4 cards of my library, and then I reveal a creature. And the backside can either tap for 1 green, or 1 green for each creature I control. So, another land that generates more than 1 mana, or can generate more than 1 mana. The Master Chef. Kolvori's true calling. She cooks. She herself gets stronger, and makes her friends stronger. The legend grows strong with this one. A protection in asceticism. Guardian Project, which I believe in this deck is the most thematic, because it requires that my creatures have different names. They are all legends. They literally have different names. Glorious Sunrise. 4 choices. Usually I just choose at the beginning of combat, draw a card if you control a creature with power 3 or greater. But the flexibility of giving a mini overrun, getting a land to tap for 3 green, drawing a card if you have a creature with power 3 or greater, or gaining 3 life is brilliant. Plus the sunrise is a very natural thing. The sun feeds the forest. Sylvan Anthem, another excellent card, plus I love the art. In Search of Greatness, our bearded squirrel talking with the big bad wolf. Perhaps the best removal spell green ever got, Song of the Dryads. Sylvan Library, very rarely will I pay life to this. And Tribute to the World Tree, another reference to the World Tree, though yes, the god here depicted is not Kolvori, is Izika. But, and again, a very recent ad, still haven't had the chance to test it, but I feel this card is absolutely bonkers. Absolutely. Moving on to the ephemeral part of the deck. There are only 2 instants. Beast Within and Force of Vigor. Both of them I feel are not only excellent removal spells, but they embody green, if I make myself clear. A double naturalize, and let's say an opponent has a nasty character, a Leshnorn. Not even the mother of machines is pure. Even she, or it, or they, whatever their pronouns are, even they are vulnerable to their most basest instincts, and this card manifests them in a rather explosive, oh my god, he just died way. Plus, a 3/3 beast is hardly a match for the guys that are in the deck. And now on to the sorceries. The other card that really propelled me to build this deck, Kamal's Druidic Vow. A legendary sorcery! I really think they should print more legendary sorceries and legendary instants, but that's a conversation for a whole different time. Because in the context of the deck, most likely than not, I mean, the last time I played this, X was 17. Out of the 17 cards that were revealed, 5 went into the graveyard. So 19 mana for 5. So 12 onto the field, a bunch of lands, a bunch of triggers. Essentially, this is a game winner for the deck. Plus, it's where usually the mana from Gaia's Cradle, Growing Rights of Italy Mock, Cradle of the Sun, Nyx Lotus, and all those things goes into. Venture Forth. A ramp spell that repeats itself, but it's not technically a tutor, because you simply reveal cards from the top of your library. I love the card. It's the only, so to speak, true ramp spell in the deck. Plus, it makes sense to me that this gang would like to, on occasion, go on an adventure. Get out of the house. Right? They just ate a lot. They're well fed. They're well drunk. Let's go out. Let's find some interesting things. Love it. The big finisher. The finale of Devastation. I was shocked upon learning the price this card goes for. Usually, what I get with this card is the God Eternal Ronas, because Ronas' ability will only resolve after this spell has completely resolved. So first my creatures get the +X and haste, and then Ronas doubles their power. It is a truly magnificent combination. Awaken the Woods. I can just make forests with this. A bunch of forests. Love it! Plus, if Baru is on the field, I'll just get a buttload of +1/+1 and trample triggers for all my green creatures. Seasons Past. One of my favorite cards ever printed. A recursion spell. A card that recycles itself. A card that manifests nature's endless cycle of life and death. Just love it. Beacon of Creation, a card that specifically mentions forests. I just love the card. Okay, yeah, it makes a lot of insects, but I just love it. And last but not least, Bramble Crush, another one of green's finest removal spells. I don't care that it is a sorcery, it can wreck anything except creatures. Which then again, I have the Tarrasque, so I don't really need to have very many cards that deal with creatures. And even if I don't have the Tarrasque, Trample, overwhelming amount of power, usually those things can help carry me to victory. Now, let's move on to the tips. Yes, Kolvori is definitely not the strongest of mono-green commanders, and Reiki is usually the preferred legendary matters mono-green commander. But she does lend herself to a very fun and casual build. She does grant you access to all the green goodness Magic has to offer. Her static ability to become a 6/6 Vigilance when you control 3 legendary creatures can make her dangerous as an attacker and a very good defender, while you can activate her ability at the end of the last opponent before you, at the end of their turn. With a bit of work, she can eliminate an opponent with commander damage. And since you are a mono-green, and as you can see, that is definitely not a hard thing to achieve. And with this, we have reached the end of my Kolvori, Goddess of Kinship deck tech. I sincerely hope you have enjoyed the deck and feel inspired to give this loquacious goddess a try and overwhelm your opponents with all the legendary goodness green has to offer. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more weekly deck techs and possibly more content. I hope to see you all next time.